Hello everybody and welcome to our final online lecture for SWO 441 Macro Social Work. What we are going to be talking about today is nonprofit resources, grants, funding, budgeting, and finances. And again, this is going to be a little bit of an abbreviated lesson. First of all, because you've learned just about everything you needed to learn this semester. I hope considering the circumstances, you've basically gotten what you were hoping for and needed out of the class, and I hope you're all doing okay. And normally we would have had some class activity to go with this. So we're going to basically talk about the practical cold hard reality of what an organization, a nonprofit, needs to operate. So why do we care about the resources these agencies need? Because as much as we wish they could, organizations cannot run on hopes, dreams, and good intentions. You need hopes and dreams, you need visions, you should have good intentions, but those alone will not keep an organization going. So what are the types of resources an organization needs in order to function? Well, they need money. First and foremost, they need money. So think about what's happening in the world right now. Think about how many of the agencies that you've interacted with, maybe where you've done your field placement, how many of them get funding from New York State? And think about what's happening financially to New York State right now. Budgetarily, if you've listened to the governor's briefings, the state is in the hole for between 10 and $15 billion. And a lot of that is money that social service organizations, nonprofits count on in order to operate. So think about how changes in funding on a state or federal level impact the organizations that people depend on. Organizations need technology, they need computers, they need internet access, they need possibly cell phones, software, hardware, printers, all that good stuff. They need tangible goods like equipment, furniture, chairs, paper, possibly vehicles, those sorts of things. They need support and advocacy, which is where some of those hope, dreams, and good intentions can come from. They need people within the organization and outside of it to support them, to advocate for them, to advocate for their client systems. They need people. That includes people who, and this is going to go back to some of our previous discussions, they need people who are going to participate, who are going to be an active part of what the organization does. They need people with that social and human capital of skill sets and talents and knowledge. They need people who are incentivized to do the job that they do. They need people with cultural competency and an ability to work with people from different backgrounds. They may need volunteers. Volunteers can be a great thing. A lot of organizations depend on them. They can also be a bad thing because volunteers may not always have the skill set you need. Volunteers may not always fully understand the mission of the organization or the goals of the organization. Sometimes you can have volunteers that butt heads with the people that are getting paid to do their jobs. So some of the ways that organizations get their financial resources, it can be from individual donors, voluntary benefactors, people who in their wills set up foundations, who set up trust funds, people who just donate just in the course of life. They can get them from direct solicitation. So some people go out of their way and seek out places to donate. Some organizations, again, do the direct solicitation via telephone and mail. They may have benefit events. They may do crowdfunding, such as GoFundMe, Kickstarter. They may have website fundraising, which almost any nonprofit organization you see or cause organization that you see will have a website with a thing to donate, usually through PayPal or something like that. As far as the telephone and mail, I get phone calls from my old school, Stony Brook, all the time. It's in my, because I'm an alumnus, it's in my directory. So when they call from the alumni office, it comes up, do not answer, they want money. So I know what they want, and I'm still a poor social worker, a poor social work educator, and I don't have money to give right now. You have foundations and civic organizations. So, for example, BISCO, the Brockport Integrated Service Clubs organization, right here in Brockport, It's made up of people from the Chamber of Commerce, the Merchant Association, the Kiwanis, the Lions, all those different organizations, the Rotary Club, and they raise money through different events, and then they use that money to support the endeavors of other organizations or groups. So scholarships, organizations that create community gardens, things like that. You also have membership dues. So NASW gets most of their money from their membership dues, from their conference fees, not right now, but their conference fees and things like that. You can also apply for grants. That could be from the government, it could be from different foundations, it could be from different corporations, and it can be through contracts that you have with the government. So you might be a nonprofit organization providing mental health services, like the one that I worked at for several years, but a lot of our money came from our contracts with Medicare and Medicaid. So we had a contract that we took Medicaid clients, and the organization was reimbursed X number of dollars for every Medicaid client that the therapist saw. So normally we would be talking about how to do a grant proposal. So in order to get a grant, which is a lot of the funding of a lot of nonprofit organizations, you have to be able to write a proposal. And it has a number of components. So you'd have to have a statement of need or opportunity. So the who, what, when, where, and why. What are we trying to do? Why should you give us this money? What is the social problem going on? You'd want statistics, facts, and figures. An opportunity. Why is this the right time to do this? Why are we the right people to do this? You'd want to have your goals and objectives. And of course, goals are sort of the big things you want to achieve, and the objectives are the smaller steps that get you to the completion of the goals. You'd have those in there too. What is your organization or group going to do? How are you going to get there? And how do those support the vision for change you want to see? Project activities. So now how are you going to accomplish your goals and objectives? What are the specific things that you are going to do to get there? So let's say you want to be able to right now provide meals for the children who are not in school and who experience need. So your vision is minimizing or eliminating hunger amongst school children in Monroe County. Your goal is providing breakfast and lunch every day that they normally might have gotten in schools. So your objectives are going to be fundraisers, maybe. So you want objectives that lead to being able to provide food. Fundraisers, getting food donated from Wegmans. So then your project activities, how are you going to accomplish that? How are you going to make contacts at Wegmans? What is your fundraiser going to look like? What are the steps to having your fundraiser happen? When are you going to do them, and how long are those phases going to take? We looked at a Gantt chart in class once. You would use a Gantt chart for that. Then an evaluation plan. How are you going to know your organization is effective? How are you going to be able to judge that you have accomplished your goal or you have fulfilled the vision that you had? Some other components of the grant proposal. You would want to have your organizational information, including your board of directors. So your board of directors, an interesting note, your board of directors should always have an odd number of members because you don't want the ability to have a tied vote. So always an odd number of people. They should represent all different types of disciplines. Your board of directors, your members are not paid. So you want people with legal expertise, medical expertise, financial expertise, all different things that are related to your cause. They should be people that can kind of provide a free service to the organization should you need it. So have an attorney on the board, because that attorney can be the source of legal information, so you're not spending your money paying an attorney for advice. Those sorts of things. So you would have your organizational information, so your organizational structure, your board of directors, your executive director, what are their disciplines, what are their backgrounds. Identified potential sources of additional funding. That's really important because no funder wants to know that everything you do is contingent upon them. They want to know that you have other sources of funding in case something happens. Additionally, very seldom will you get approved for the entire amount that you're requesting. So if you're asking for $50,000 in grant funding, they may want to see where you're going to get half of it from, because they're only willing to provide half. They want to know you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. You would also want to attach a budget. So that budget would include a number of things we're going to go over in a moment. That would be expenses and income for individual projects and for the organization overall. So for each activity that your organization engages in, and then also for overall functioning. Generally, proof of your tax-exempt status is required. That is done through the IRS. Normally, you would have to incorporate your organization, and that's done just through, it's a simple business function that's done with the tax department. And then you would have to file for nonprofit status, and you would have either non-political status or a political status, which we'll go over in a few minutes. So what goes into an organization's budget? I've in the past, when I taught grad students, had them do a grant proposal for a hypothetical organization, and it amazed me how simple the budgets were, because you don't really think about what goes into an organization's funding. So you have to have compensation for each employee. And it's not just a matter of having, I'm going to pay the social worker this much. It's not that simple. So first of all, you want it to be a living wage. Don't forget, we don't like having that stereotype of being underpaid. If you have an organization and you're hiring someone with an LCSW and X number of years of experience, you need to pay them what they're worth. So you want to have a decent salary. In addition to that, though, you want to include their benefits. So that would be possibly health insurance, retirement. You'd be matching for Social Security. You'd be matching for work, for Medicare, all that good stuff. So on average, whatever you are going to pay an employee, you need to up that by about 20 to 25% at least to accommodate for everything else that goes along with having an employee that's not just their salary. You would want to put in there all overhead related to physical location, and that's not just your rent. That's your rent, that's your electricity, possibly your gas if you have gas heat. It would be your insurance, liability insurance, possibly security, any number of other things you need to actually use the building, a water bill. Then overhead related to your functioning. So that would be all of your other equipment, your technology, your internet, your Wi-Fi, all that fun stuff. Paper clips. There's no paperclip fairy that's going to come and deliver things from Staples to your doorstep. You got to pay for all that. Advertising, outreach, and public relations. If you are paying for any sort of professional affiliation, anything like that. Some of that could be done, what's called in the budget is in kind. So it would be in your budget, but maybe Staples or Office Depot or whoever the heck it is donating all of your paper clips, toner, all that stuff. So it would still be in your budget, but it would be put in there as an in-kind budget item. And then finally, the cost of carrying out the mission of the organization. Once you are up and running and once you have a functioning office, you still need to deliver services to your client and client systems. So what is it going to cost to do that? Those are all part of your budget, and it can be a pretty lengthy document. So now how do we get funding? Who might fund a nonprofit organization? Again, it could be government, state, local, federal government. Different members of the government. NIH is a big funder, National Institute of Health. Different foundations, and again, different corporations. So the way to do that is through Foundation Center, and there's actually a location right in Rochester, which of course we can't go to right now. But it's interesting, it's a central clearinghouse for funding. So you can go into this database. Normally you have to have a paid subscription, but you can use public places for it. And you would type in what your client system is, what you're trying to do, and you would actually be able to look at all different funders and grants that are on the database and be able to see what you might qualify for, how to apply for the grant, what's involved, and what's the timeline. So some people think, well, if I apply, right now it's April 16th. If I apply for a grant on April 16th, I should know by May 1st. No, it can take over 6 months to hear on a grant. Sometimes you have to submit a letter of interest. Then wait and see if they even want to give you the application access. Then you have to apply for the grant, and then you may have to wait for 6 months to hear anything on it. Then you might wait over a year if you're approved to actually get the money. So you could be looking at upwards of 2 years to get grant funding, which is another reason why you shouldn't pin all your hopes on one funder. And then what could determine whether you get the funding? Well, first, how well written is your grant application? Generally, if it's poorly written and they can't very clearly see what you're doing and you're not following their guidelines, they're just going to toss it to the side. They're not even going to look at it. How well written is it? How well does it go along the guidelines of what they fund? How well does it fit with their mission? And how plausible and realistic is your plan? Those are all the things that determine whether or not you get funding. Now, with funding comes some moral and ethical issues. So first of all, what are the political affiliations of your funding source? So let's say that your funding is, you're trying to fund something to help low-income women get access to contraceptive options. You're not going to apply to the Hobby Lobby Foundation for that funding. You have to think about the values of your funding sources and whether they match the values of your client system and your organization. What other causes are they funding? Think of the historical context of the funding source and your community. How has that funding source, that organization, that government agency interacted with your client community in the past? Have they generally been advocates of that community, or have they done things that hurt that community? Look at the people representing your potential funders. Are they a match for the mission of your organization? A lot of times, if you get money from somebody, they are going to want to overlook how you're using it, and they're going to want to say in how your organization functions in the context of that money. How comfortable would you be, and would your client be, your client system be, the community you're serving? How comfortable would they be having this funding source being able to have involvement and intervene in the way you're functioning? How well would that work? Consider if there are conflicts between your different funding sources. So now let's talk about the monetary morals and ethics of nonprofit organizations. So again, how well are you compensating your employees? What is the salary of your executive director and your administration and managers in comparison to your frontline workers and support staff? There was a situation when I worked in the HIV/AIDS field where one of the main case management organizations who a lot of clients depended on for grocery assistance said that they no longer had funding to provide grocery gift cards to their needy clients. And then at the same time, their executive director got a raise to $450,000 a year, where their staff members were getting a tiny fraction of that. So are you paying your executive director $200,000 and only paying your social workers $30,000? Are you paying your workers a living wage? And that living wage is, again, higher than you might think it is. We've talked about the fight for $15 an hour. Again, to get a one-bedroom apartment at fair market rate in the state of New York on average, working 40 hours a week, you would need to be making almost $33 an hour. So $33 an hour times, 40 hours in a week. My math is not great. It's like $1,320 a week. Times 4 is about $5,500 a month. Times 12 months, you're looking at about $66,000 in salary to afford a one-bedroom apartment plus benefits. My math might be off, but I don't think it is. So are you paying your workers what they're worth? Are your expenditures for operating reasonable? Your expenditures for running your office should not be the bulk of what of the money coming in. You need to balance your spending. How much spending on overhead versus direct service is okay? The rule of thumb is that no more than 25% of the money you have coming in, of the money in your budget, should be spent on salaries, overhead, all that kind of stuff. 75% should be going out to the community that you are serving. So can you justify your operating expenses? One of the funny things about the March of Dimes, I don't know if you've heard of the March of Dimes, I believe it's for muscular dystrophy. But it's interesting, again, that it's called the March of Dimes because of every dollar, only about a dime actually supports the cause. The rest goes to overhead, administrative, all that kind of stuff. So where is your money going? Is it going where it's meant to go? And then you need to think about political activities. So most nonprofit organizations are what's called a 501c3. They can spend up to 20% of their budget on nonpartisan lobbying and general voter education. So for this upcoming election, they can't say, vote Biden, we hate Trump. What they can do is put out information about the different platforms and the different policy proposals that the different candidates are supporting, and then let you have your own opinion on that. So only up to 20% can be spent on that. And again, nonpartisan lobbying. So by nonpartisan, they can lobby for a certain cause or issue, but they can't lobby for a certain candidate or party. Of course, they may do that inherently by virtue, but they can't lobby for Biden. Now, a 501c4 is what's called technically a social welfare organization. They are allowed to lobby for legislative change. That's treated kind of liberally. But they can't as clearly advocate for a particular political candidate. While political advocacy should only be part of the purpose in order to remain tax exempt, a lot of them ignore that. So contributions to a 501c4 usually are not tax deductible. Whereas if you donate to a 501c3, it is tax deductible. But here's the interesting thing though. If you donate to a 501c3, they have to provide a list of their donors and donation amounts. If you donate to a 501c4, because it's not tax deductible, they do not have to disclose who their donors are. They do not have to disclose how much is being donated to them. Examples that are the AARP, which is usually for older adults, but one of the other examples is the NRA, the National Rifle Association. They are a 501c4. If you donate to the NRA, you are not allowed to deduct it from your taxes, but you also won't have your name disclosed as a supporter. So just something interesting to know. That is really about all I have for you. So again, for an organization, where funding comes from, the ethics of funding, how to apply for funding, and just sort of some of the ethical and moral considerations that come along with operating a nonprofit organization, social service, human service organization. So again, I hope that you're doing okay. I hope that you got, again, pretty much what you were hoping for out of the semester. I know the semester hasn't really gone how any of us were hoping. I know that graduation has been, we'll use a kind word and say postponed. That's devastating, and I hate that for all of you. But don't let that take away from the fact that by getting through this program, by getting through the semester, this is a huge win in your world, and you've accomplished something amazing. I've missed seeing you. Stay safe. Again, wash your hands, stay healthy, and I'll see you soon. Bye.